So let's head down to the feature match area.
Hello and welcome to this round 3 of Grand Prix Bologna. We have on the left of our screen the Belgian team, Branko Nering, Pascal Vieren and Peter Vieren. Pascal, of course, hot off having made the top 8 of a recent Pro Tour, up against Sebastian Vancher, Cosmin Achim and Jojo Tamash on the other side of our screens. Each of these teams have started off with a perfect 2-0 record. We'll get a chance to see whether or not they can continue that run going forward. Now, just before we started this game, you were asked a little maths question. Frankie Numbers, what's the answer if one team is 1-0 up in all their game ones? Assuming that all of the matches are 50-50, what's the chances that the other team emerges victorious?
Well, I arrived at 18.75%, or 3 in 16.
Lovely stuff.
Not very high, but it's always still possible.
Conveniently, Magic is not all just about coin flips. Sometimes you have the ability to outplay, outmaneuver, outsideboard your opponent, find a way through. Benelish guard there coming through. They get 2-2 that gets +1 power whenever you end up with a legendary creature in play. And wow! If you're looking for a Benelish theme deck, there's the Marshal, and giving +1/+1 to all creatures in spite of not being legendary. First the Honor Guard, now the Marshal. Big start from Branko Nering. Do we think that he could potentially be mono-white here?
Easily possible, but what's perhaps more important here is that his opponent, Sebastian Vanchea, hasn't even played a second land yet. Maybe it was like a mulligan into 6, keep a 1-lander, hope to get there with the Scry, but it just did not work out for him, and Branko is not giving him a lot of time. This is a super fast clock, and a very strong opener that would have probably been able to beat even a reasonable draw from his opponent. But yep, that match or this game took about 1 minute.
Yeah, Shanna Sisse's Legacy, the one card that we didn't get a chance to name check in there, meaning that Branko is not mono-white, and almost a temptation there if you're Branko Nering to, if it was a one-on-one game especially. If you think that you can win without playing your second colour, maybe throw people off a little bit in terms of what you've got going on. And it looks like Pascal Vieren is also all about the triple colour cards. Immediately getting a Goblin Chainbreaker down again, which looks like it got value, killing off a Knight of Dominaria, and now killing a Davenant Trapper thanks to the first strike on that 3-3, 4-3.
You see Cosmin reading the card. Maybe he missed it actually had first strike. Yeah, but these triple colored cards are very powerful, well worth building your deck around. And it looks like Pascal is indeed fully mono red, not splashing a color. Beyond Goblin Chain Whirler, there's another card in the set, the Flame of Kelt, that also rewards you for staying mono red. And these are the types of decks that you will see a bit more often in Team Sealed than in regular Sealed or Draft. Because, well, in Team Sealed you have 12 packs. That is often enough to build a semi-reasonable monocolor deck. And when you have these payoff cards, it can easily work.
So Blessed Light did deal with the Chain Whirler, but there is a follow-up here in the Cyclops coming down for
it's
one of
the
rampaging
Cyclops. I do love the flavor on this card. You know, it just gets blindsided when it gets blocked by 2 creatures. Can only keep track of 1, so then its power reduces.
Yeah, apparently only having 1 eye, in addition to depth perception issues, also means that you literally can't see 2 creatures nearly as well.
But this is certainly above rate. 4-4 for 4 mana is an excellent deal. It's always a 4-4 on defense. And of course, Riley Knight is on the card viewer, so he will be sure to put in the best Cyclops flavor cards from Magic's history, because Dominaria is a set that celebrates the history of well, Magic as a whole.
Very much so. Good job there, Riles. So Gitu Chronicler coming down here, just a 1-3 having been cast without the kicker. If you do pay the kicker, you get to return instants and sorceries from your graveyard to your hand, but realistically that costs a lot of mana, and right now there are all of these knights on the other side of the battlefield. Cosmin Achim has had a slightly more strong start than his teammate Sebastian did in Game 1. Call the Cavalry generating some knights. The Knight of Dominaria also coming into the red zone here.
So this is kind of a suspicious attack, definitely representing some kind of pump spell. Adamant Will is a pump spell in white. Could also have Run Amok in red, +3/+3 to an attacking creature. Maybe Gideon's Reproach to deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. Looks like it is Adamant Will. So that will make the Knight token big enough to take down the Cyclops, and with Indestructible it will survive combat as well.
So 2 remaining Call the Cavalry Knight tokens left in play. 2/2 Vigilance creatures. Vigilance pretty decent. In a board stall it means that you can get a few attacks in even if you're worried about the crackback, because of course those creatures not tapping. Trading off with a Goblin on Pascal Viren's side of things. Viren's deck seems to have run out of a little bit of gas in some respects here. It's not really been able to commit too much interesting to the board.
Meanwhile, Viren did block the correct Knight token to make sure that this token with this beautiful art still stuck on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's the one generated by History of Benalia on Magic Online. But more Goblins for Pascal Viren, with Siege Gang Commander bringing 3 of them along. Meanwhile, Tiana, Ship's Caretaker on the other side of things. 3/3 flying first strike, and the potential to get back artifacts and auras that go to the graveyard.
Siege Gang Commander is a pretty exciting reprint. One of the iconic cards from the Goblin decks of the Onslaught block era. In the current Dominaria format, it is one of the better rares to have. Lots of board presence for 5 mana and the ability to shoot down opposing creatures or even players as well once you get to the late game.
It does even have the potential to get paired up with Goblin Warchief once more for all of those Goblins to get haste and indeed the Siege Gang to be a little bit cheaper.
Or Skirk Prospector, that's not so much playable in Limited, but exciting for Constructed.
And Fight with Fire here coming along to deal with the Tiana, Ship's Caretaker that was in play. That Angel hits the graveyard, leaving just alone Misa Pegasus to join the Angel in the graveyard. It's just Siege Gang Commander left on its lonesome, but that still attacks for 2 and at some point could potentially sacrifice itself for a final 2 if absolutely necessary.
Yep, and now the board is clear apart from the Siege Gang Commander. Viren slightly ahead. Oh, Viren heavily ahead.
Another great reprint. Skizik comes down with kicker. That's a 5/3 trample haste body. If you don't pay the kicker, so if you pay just 4 for it, then the elemental will get sacrificed at the end of turn. That not the case here though. Attacking for a lot of damage from virtually nowhere here, Pascal Viren. This is what he needed to do in order to get a bit of velocity in this game.
Yeah, now a pretty short clock. Could deal 9 this turn by attacking with both and then sacrificing the Siege Gang Commander. So it's not quite lethal yet, but Skizik is definitely one of those cards that allows you to turn around a game quite rapidly. Oh, does he have 2 instants or sorceries? I think he does.
Yeah, the Gitu Lava Runner, if you have an appropriate amount of instants and sorcery in the graveyard, a couple of them in there, +1 power and haste, and that means that Cosmin has to do something. He's got Wizard's Lightning to target Skizik.
And very good timing by Cosmin. Cognizant of the fact that Run Amok is in the format, which gives +3/+3 to an attacking creature. So you should play the Wizard's Lightning in the beginning of combat step, so that Viren would not have the ability to save his creature from Wizard's Lightning if he had Run Amok.
Davenant Trapper coming down here. If it can hang around, it'll be able to make life a little bit fiddlier for Pascal on attacks, but any Goblin drawn by Pascal is pretty decent here about trying to get through more damage, but also more haste creatures coming through in the form of Keldon Overseer from Pascal Viren. 3/1 with haste. If you've got lots of mana, 4 mana for the kicker on this one, you get to borrow one of your opponent's creatures to attack with. But even in the meantime, just a 3/1 with haste for 3 definitely has merit when you're already trying to be a very aggressive red deck.
And yep, Siege Gang Commander sacrificing itself for the final damage. That will do it for their first game.
Pascal Viren picking up game 1 win in relatively quick fashion. Obviously couldn't quite match up to Branko's victory against one land on the table to his left. Just Peter Viren left in his game 1 against Jojo Tamash. And I want to talk briefly with you, Frank, about what happens to the landscape of team limited deck building when one player picks to be a monocolored deck?
Well, in general, in Team Sealed, you have to split up one color. or you have to go monocolor. If you think of, you can either have 3 2-color decks and then split up one color, or you choose one color to be monocolor and then have 2 2-color decks next to it. That is often the standard you would see in Team Sealed. These triple colored cards definitely make it more appealing to have this one monocolor deck, as they did, because Branko is playing green-white with a triple white card, but still some green cards in there.
And Peter Viren here looks like he's on at least 3 colours. Sultai colours there, green, black, and blue. A reasonable mix of spells here. He's not the sort of heavy green-black that we've seen in previous rounds.
Tempest Jin. So they could have gone mono white, mono red, mono blue. Like probably, given that they are splashing 2 colors in here, that mono blue deck was just not deep enough. I mean, you don't want to. You still want to make sure that you have some reasonable playables in all 3 decks. But this is pretty exciting to see all these triple colored cards being put to good use by the Belgians.
Yeah, it's the first triple coloured card you see, fantastic. The second one you see in your pool of a different colour gets a little shaky. The third one, somewhere along the line, someone's going to have a 3-mana card that, more realistically, is probably being cast, on turn 5, I would say?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. It depends a bit. If you have, like, for example, 11 planes, you can reasonably expect to play a card like Banalish Marshal by turn 5 or 6. Definitely not with like the 90% consistency that you would love to have, but still a majority of the games.
I mean, I guess that the Marshal, you don't need to be casting it on turn 3 for it to have maximum potency. Some of the other ones, getting them into play earlier is a little bit more exciting, but Ariel, Knight of Windgrace, coming down for Peter Viren, who has shown his 4th colour. This is what happens when you've got teammates that are very heavily invested in just the one colour. Aided there by a skittering Surveyor, finding the planes to be able to cast it. Meanwhile, Cloud Reader Sphinx coming along for Jojo Tamash here. He gets to look at the top of his deck and sees 1 Swamp and 1 other card. Neither of them good enough on this battlefield. Sends them both to the bottom, passes things back, where Peter Viren has a bit of a monster of a board here.
Yeah, once you untap with Ariel and you're still at 20 life, it is pretty hard to lose from that spot. This is one of the better rares in the format, obviously demanding on the mana base, but 4/4 Vigilance without any abilities would already be good for 4 mana, and both of the abilities are actually super good.
So Vicious Offering there, dealing with the one creature on the other side of the battlefield, and meaning that big attacks coming from... Oh, sorry, I missed those clerics there, but they jumped under a bus, as it were, as Peter Viren got in some pretty substantial attacks here.
Well, it will be tough for Giorgio Tamas to come back from this spot.
So, a kicked Drake here.
Yeah, I do like all these kicker cards. The flexibility that they provide is quite valuable. Still, it doesn't help him to solve the Ariel problem.
How do you solve a problem like Ariel? Potentially just by going on to the next game. It's a very, very powerful creature.
And this should be 4 enough. So currently all the Belgians have won their first game, which means that if indeed every player was 50-50 to win any game, the team to your right would be 18.75% to win the match. But like the 3 Belgians, they are 3 of the 4 players from the Belgian team that made it to the finals of the World Magic Cup a couple of years ago. Both Pascal and Peter, they're brothers. They're gold level or about to be gold level in the Pro Player Club. So they are pretty experienced. They've also played Team GPs before, so they know how to communicate and know each other's styles and preferences. So you would have to favor the Belgians at this point, even more than just in, let's say, 50-50 matches.
So we have a relatively busy board here. Branko Nering with green-white, not with the crazy early start that we saw last game, but with a lot of creatures on the battlefield, Mammoth Spider being the big roadblock on both sides that's kind of allowed for this board to get as busy as it has. One card I want to focus on, though, briefly, is Fungal Plots in play for Branko Nering here. That a card that allows him to both generate saplings and sacrifice those saplings for value. Is that the sort of thing that might potentially be able to break open a stall?
Potentially, mainly due to the card draw ability, because once the board is stalled, as much as it is over here and both players are still at a high life total, getting a couple of 1/1 saplings doesn't really matter all that much. But being able to turn 2 dead creatures into, well, mostly a new card will give you a fair bit of advantage over the course of a long game. And who knows if Branko finds, for example, a Sapling Migration, that can also turn into 2 additional cards, potentially closer to something like a Benalish Marshal. Oh, by the way, if he finds the Benalish Marshal, then those Sapling tokens also become much bigger. So yeah, Fungal Plot is a card that is a bit divisive. It depends on your deck whether it fits or not. In certain decks it's just 2 mana, do literal nothing, or 4 mana, make a 1/1 and that's it. But if you have a deck that either wants to go into a long game or that has a bunch of Sapling makers, it is quite a powerful engine.
Baloth Gorger getting played with kicker there by Sebastian Vancher. And that one of the picks, one of the higher level picked commons.
This is like a mirror match. Baloth for Branko as well. Yeah, this may be the best, or at least one of the best common creatures in Dominaria. Kicker adds a lot because, well, I mean, a 4/4 for 4 mana is already a good deal. But then having the flexibility to almost double its size in the late game is what pushes it over the top. There are also a couple of cards that care about kicked spells, so they get a bonus when you kick a spell. Though those are mostly found in red-green. So still the board is pretty much stalled. 7/7s and 3/5s holding the fort on both sides. Maybe on the next turn, Branko could equip his Jousting Lance to Baloth Gorger and attack with then a 9-power first striker. Well, that, I mean, maybe Sebastian can line up some kind of weird quintuple block, which we might actually see. But it is a potential way to break through this board stall.
I mean, Krosan Druid with kicker there, though, gaining 10 life for Sebastian Vancher. This is going to be a game that makes up for the fact that game 1 took essentially no time whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, this is Magic as maybe it was originally designed to be played. You know, some combat math, a board stall. You have to figure out how to attack, how to block, and well, Sebastian now has to find a way to block over here. There we see the creator of Magic immortalized into his own card back in the days. So if Sebastian wants to block this 9-power first striker and take it down, he needs like almost his entire board. Looks like he's just gonna jump block for the time being. Curious why he blocked with a 2/2 rather than a Sapling token. Sure, the token is a 2/2 as well, thanks to the Fungal Lord, but what if that one dies?
Misa Unicorn there, now picking up the lance. Some might suggest that Misa Unicorn kind of already equipped with a lance in the middle of its forehead, but now it also has +2 power and first strike when attacking.
Ooh. Well, that's a good one. 2 4/4 flyers from the Bladewing family.
Verix Bladewing, the latest in the dynasty of Bladewings. With kicker does bring along a buddy. Karok's Bladewing being that buddy. So it is another legendary dragon token. So both of these 4/4s now on the battlefield, threatening to do something, but still somewhat cowed by the spider on the other side of the table.
Sure, and especially when you consider that the spider might pick up a Jousting Lance on Sebastian's turns. It's potentially a 5/5 reach. So, I mean, in general, flyers are great to break through a board stall, and in this sealed format, you have more board stalls than usual, I would say. But those Mammoth Spiders are putting in a lot of work.
Yeah, Mammoth Spider, one of those cards that we're all quite used to Giant Spider, and Giant Spider was fine. Mammoth Spider, it costs 1 more mana and you get 1 more power and 1 more toughness. And that difference ends up being pretty substantial.
Yeah, there are plenty of 3 toughness flyers in the format, like Pegasus Courser, that Mammoth Spider can actually take down and kill. The 5th toughness also means that even if you face a kicked Academy Drake 4/4 flyer, you can still block it, or like this pair of Blade Wings. So yeah, 3/5 often towers over a battlefield, but here we have another attack with the 9 power Gorger.
I guess if it worked last turn, there's no reason to think that it would not also be successful going forward. First strike and that amount of power means that there's just a huge amount of bodies going to need to be put in front of this Baloth Gorger in order to actually kill it off.
Yep. And I do think it is possible if you just block with, say, like all the creatures on the left side of the board. You would lose the Baloth Gorger and then something else to first strike. Maybe you have to put in a couple more creatures. You have to make sure that like at least 7 power survives the first strike. But Vanchea is just on the chump block plan. That said, that this doesn't really give a good long game plan, because now you see a 5/5 spider. So Vanchea doesn't really have great attacks. This might change things. This will definitely change things.
Yeah, if you're looking for a card that will shine in the super late game, Slimefoot the Stowaway definitely qualifies. His body in and of itself, not all that exciting, a 2/3 for 3 mana, but 4 mana now generates a Sapling token for Sebastian Vanchea, and anytime a Sapling that he controlled dies, Slimefoot the Stowaway deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life.
Yep. So those Saplings will actually be 2/2s, thanks to the Talid Lord that Sebastian also has. Even the Slimefoot itself is a 3/4, that also gets the boost. But more importantly, it provides him with a steady stream of chump blockers for the first striking huge Baloth Gorger. And yeah, he has access to 8 mana, so from now on he can start to create 1 chump blocker for the Gorger and go up a Sapling. Eventually build up a board where you just swing all out with all of your tokens, and then it doesn't even matter if Nijring blocks or not. Either he takes the damage from the Saplings, or he just blocks a Sapling and then gets drained for a point. So at this point Sebastian is definitely in the lead.
Well, spiders everywhere, not a drop to drink.
Yeah, that doesn't quite change things yet. I mean, Branko does have the engine, so to say, with the fungal plots. Okay, and it did find him a removal spell.
Yeah. Ancient Animus here, meaning that he gets to have a little bit of a fight with Slimefoot the Stowaway, and Slimefoot, not built for fighting, though might well be built very well for the likes of Brawl and Commander. A great kind of a thematic general to have if you want to be going down that fungal plan.
Yep.
Ancient Animus, you don't have to have a legendary creature in play for it to be effective, though obviously it's a little bit more potent if you do.
Yeah, it's worded a bit weirdly, but you always get the fight. And in a deck with as many big monsters like Baloth Gorger and the Mammoth Spider, you will often have a good body to fight with an opposing bomb like Slimefoot. So, bad news for the Talid fans. It's down.
And worth noting that in the meantime in this game too, Pascal Viren has picked up his first match win. So thus far, Team Belgian putting on a bit of a display here in the feature match area, looking to potentially, if they can win 1 more game out of the 2 games currently going, they will be able to take this series and advance to 3-0 in this tournament.
Yeah, fresh off his top 8 at the previous Pro Tour with the blue-red Pyromancer deck. Pascal Viren knows his way around Goblin Chain Whirler as well.
And here's a card that, in principle, can potentially break things open.
Oh, yes.
Because with Pegasus Courser, now it means that at least 1 attack from that Baloth will be able to go in the air and potentially actually deal a little bit of damage. Obviously, that means kind of throwing the Pegasus Courser into a dragon.
Yeah, that is the problem. There's still 2 good blockers for the Pegasus Courser.
3, including the spider.
Oh, yeah, and the spider too. So, yeah, with Sebastian still at 26 life, it's probably not even worth to trade in a Pegasus Courser for just a couple extra points of damage. that Balot Gorger by itself is still going on the perfect first striking attack plan. And at some point Sebastian has to do something, either line up like a proper block for the Balot Gorger in an attempt to take it down, or draw into some way that changes the board. Could be a removal spell for Balot Gorger, could be another card with an important long game ability like Slime Food. But Sebastian does need something, it looks like.
Now, something that I'm learning from watching this match and a few of the other matches that we've had that have gone kind of longer is the importance of building a plan within your sealed decks in this format to deal with a board stall.
Yes, many of these games, and I think this is a good example, do turn into a board stall. In general, the average creature in Dominaria has slightly higher toughness than power. The format is also a bit slower, and that means that evasion is at a premium, or other ways to break through a board stall, more so than usual. It also means that you have to ration your removal more than you've done in previous sets. Previous sets, in Limited, you might just fire off your removal spell for the first 4-drop that your opponent plays. Here, since the games can go so long, you may just want to hold on to it for a long time until your opponent plays a threat that you really need to answer.
And right now, yeah, if one player drew a solid bit of removal, it certainly has the potential to turn a game around. As things stand, Peter Viren in a crazy race with Branko Nering to see which one can potentially seal this match. We will, of course, bring you an update if it works out that Peter Viren is able to emerge victorious against Jojo Tamash.
Sebastian still on the chump block plan. To me, that does say that Sebastian has at least a bunch of good cards in his deck that will help him deal with this situation that he's just waiting for to draw. But every turn the game goes on, that fungal plot from Branko Nering also becomes better and better.
So here we see a Call the Cavalry, getting a couple more creatures for Branko Nering here. He's not really in a spot where big all-out attacks to try and get around things look all too enticing, but having bodies on the board does mean that he's a little bit safer from any kind of big swings from the other side of the table. And with so much mana available, if at some point Nering does decide he wants to go in on fungal plots a little bit, sacrificing 2 saplings to draw a card and gain some life, he will almost certainly be able to cast multiple spells.
So far, Jousting Lance has been pretty much the MVP of this match. Especially when games go long, equipment become more valuable because you have like so many opportunities to attach them to different creatures. First strike on your own turn is obviously huge here. Oh, we are going to see the big block, it looks like. Okay, so you need to line up enough creatures so that even after 9 power of first strike, you will always have 7 power of blocking creatures remaining, no matter how Branko distributes the damage. This doesn't work yet, so that would indicate that Sebastian has some kind of pump spell or something else going on. Could be maybe a kicked Wild Onslaught, for instance, or let's see what it could be. It could also just be a naturalized style effect for the Jousting Lance. Well, I think the green one is a sorcery.
All right, so 2 creatures have died to first strike. The third one does not die, but also does not successfully kill the Baloth. Something suspicious going on there.
Okay, this play confuses me. What's going on here? Ah, right. So the Keldon Raider still survived to deal 4 damage, and then afterwards 4 more was added by Shivan Fire. So that ultimately was enough to take down the Balot.
And then, of course, we have the opportunity with G2 Chronicler to get back a spell from the graveyard thanks to the kicker cost, and it looks like it will be that Shivan Fire. Top red common, would we say?
Yes.
Not the Chronicler, the Gita Fire. The Shivan Fire, should I say?
Yes, it's probably even the best common in the set. There are very few playable common creatures that a kicked Gita Fire cannot kill. But there are a bunch of 2 toughness creatures for 3 or 4 mana that you might be able to kill for 1 mana. Instant speed also very relevant during combat. So it is just a perfect removal spell. We used to have Burst Lightning that did effectively the same but could also hit players. But even without the ability to hit players, it's just as good. Because especially in Limited, you're usually killing creatures anyway.
So Shanna Sisse's Legacy is coming in for the attacks here from Branko Nering. We saw her very briefly in Game 1. That was enough to prompt the concession from Sebastian Vanchier.
So that's currently a 12-12. Not bad for 2 mana.
Yeah, sadly, all of that effort to kill off one 7/7 holding a lance. There's a different 7-power creature holding a lance, and indeed an even bigger creature on the battlefield.
Yep. And Juggernaut, which, as it stands, would just jump attack into the Balot Gorger. But I wouldn't be surprised if Branko is planning an all-out attack on the next turn, given that by now Sebastian doesn't have as many blockers anymore as he had before.
Alfheim Druid coming down, a 0/2 that generates mana, not what Vanchier is really needing at this point.
I guess you can always send the Juggernaut into the air with Pegasus Courser. That by itself is a strong combo to build around in Sealed or Draft.
I mean, ultimately, it's not even that bad for Branko Nering here if he has a creature or 2 dying.
Yeah,
Ends up giving the Lance to the Juggernaut, so at least it will have first strike and 7 power.
Yeah, that will help it attack into the Balot Gorger. And even if it dies, it's just more food for the fungal plots. Not sure how that works flavor-wise, turning a Juggernaut into a Saproling, but... well,
Crunchy old Saproling.
Yeah.
And it's something that has been a very long time coming in this game. Branko Nering, ever from the point that he started attacking with his Jousting Lance, looked to be in a gradually winning position, because even if a lot of work was done to kill off the creature with the Lance, something else could then pick it up. And very slowly but surely he has whittled down Sebastian's board to the point that it is now not going to be able to block everything that Sebastian might like to have blocked.
Yeah, and another key play in this game was that Branko had or maybe had kept the Ancient Animus to deal with Slimefoot. If Sebastian would have had Slimefoot in play for many turns, that might have been decisive. Such a mana sink to keep on churning out Saprolings would have made a big difference. But Branko had the key removal spell that he needed, and has ultimately used Jousting Lance to a lot of good effect.
It's funny, normally when you see an equipment that costs 3, it can feel like a lot. Here's Benalish Marshall, all of those Saprolings suddenly looking much scarier.
I mean, I would almost have to imagine an all-out attack here. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, this is not a format replete with fog effects to prevent all combat damage.
I mean, maybe an instant speed removal spell like the Shivan Fire on Benalish Marshall, line up a bunch of good blocks and then swing back is what Branko might be a bit scared of. But especially if you still have like some fungal plots activations available, plus a couple of vigilance creatures, seems safe enough.
So lots of creatures attacking, technically a couple more of them have vigilance, but ultimately that's kind of moot within the overall decision making, because Branko Nering able to pick up his second game win. That's enough for the Belgian team of the 2 Viren brothers and Branko Nering to pick up the match. Congratulations to them. They are now 3-0. You can see them just packing up their bags and heading off to tell their friends about the quick game, the slow game, and the fact that ultimately every single game that they started, they won.
Yep, and it's just good to see all of these triple-colored cards in action. They definitely built their seal decks to exploit all of them, and well, word out for them.
Well, we will have more Time Walk magic for you very, very soon. Do not go anywhere. But first, we have just these messages. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix Bologna here in Italy. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Frank Carsten. We are watching Team Limited with this brand new Dominaria set. Literally came out yesterday, and today players are playing in a GP, and we've already seen a whole host of different styles of play, styles of decks, but one thing that is coming across loud and clear is that there is the potential in this format for board stalls. We saw it a little bit in that last round. Branko Nering, in spite of winning his game one in essentially no time at all due to his opponent not getting the lands they needed, he did find himself in a bit of a slow one for game 2. And because we've gone through quite a reasonable chunk of the round already, we're actually going to join our Time Walk match for their game 2s. So we get to see everything following all of the game 1s. Basically we're jumping in on Ben Jones against Arno Jochum. Jones on the right of our screen, along with Charles Eletambi, Mark Purvis. This English team had a reasonable amount of success as a team and now trying to get a little bit more going here. Arno, though, he's got the roadblock in terms of that Goliath spider, and then the things that he's got going along with it, not too shabby either.
Yeah, 2 of the better artifacts in the entire set, pretty much. IC Manipulator has been around in Magic for a long time. Still good, always capable of tapping down the best creature or perhaps artifact or land that your opponent has.
And then there's Helm of the Host.
Oh yeah.
So Helm of the Host, it's an expensive piece of equipment to equip. Fully 5 mana to cast, 4 to cast, 5 to equip. But then it does mean that at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to create a copy of the equipped creature. That copy has haste. That copy does not go away at the end of turn, which means that if you can keep that Helm of the Host in play for any length of time whatsoever, you can really put a hurting on what's going on between these players. It's a very, very powerful card if it gets to stay in play and get equipped, which is something that Arno Jochum has successfully achieved here.
Yep, and you don't even have to attack with the creature to get the trigger. It just happens at the beginning of combat. And this means that Ben Jones now has to deal with... he has a Helm of his own?
So apparently these guys are the hosts with the most. They both have the Helm. They are both generating additional creatures, where Arno is creating an army of spiders, a terrifying thought. On the other side of things, instead we're going to be Skittering. Skittering Surveyor at the moment is the equipped creature. Obviously, it's less exciting if you are making smaller creatures, but he is at least getting a land out of it each and every time he gets a new Skittering Surveyor coming into play.
I mean, those lands could ultimately prove to be useful, especially when you have Rona, Disciple of Giggs, to sink the mana in to exile the top card of your library, and then you can play any historic cards exiled with Rona. That is the blue-black gold card.
Well, you can play any of the cards exiled with Rona. It's just you can only exile from a graveyard a historic card.
Nice.
And actually, Helm of the Host, if you equip it to a legendary creature, the tokens that you make are not legendary.
Yep.
Meanwhile, whatever creature you have equipped becomes legendary by virtue of having a Helm on. It's the alpha version of all of these tokens. And if it works out that you have, say, lots of Ronas in play, well, you can just play lots of cards and exile lots of cards from the top of your deck. It all gets very complicated indeed. But the main thing is you get lots of creatures.
Yep. But so far, it definitely favors Arnaud, because I'd much rather get an extra 3/5 spider every turn than a Skittering Surveyor every turn. But it could all change around pretty rapidly. If Ben Jones finds some humongous green monster and starts making copies of that, then it could change around.
I mean, I guess that regardless of anything else going on, at least Ben Jones knows that he can keep pace with blockers just as fast as Arno can create attackers, because given they both have Helms, they're both getting a free creature each and every turn.
Yeah, sure, but then if you're still making Skittering Surveyors, you are chump blocking, whereas your opponent's creatures stick around. So Arnaud's army is growing, whereas Jones is just chump blocking every turn. So it's up to Jones to, change something here.
Ooh, blink of the eye there, and blink of an eye, sorry, enough to bounce a key permanent. Doesn't have to be a creature, and in this case, goes for the Helm, because that Helm, remember, is costing 4 to cast, 5 to equip. That's more than a turn's worth of mana available to Ben Jones right now.
Yep, and you have to bounce it during Ben Jones's main phase, because if you wait until combat, then the trigger is already on the stack. But, Arnaud was already ahead. This will help him even more. Grow from the Ashes is a very nice card to have in green. And many of the green decks we've seen so far in this Team Sealed format are splashing a color, often for some powerful gold cards. Roar from the Ashes is one of the few fixers in the entire format that makes it possible. And also somewhat unusually, the lands that you search up actually enter the battlefield untapped. So you can use them for mana right away.
Yeah, I very much like that. It means that you can fix the colors of your mana easily, and it doesn't feel like it costs very much mana to cast because you're immediately getting some of that mana back untapped.
Well, it's jump block central for Ben Jones here.
When your tokens are 1/1s and your opponent are 3/5s, it doesn't feel like a very fair game of Magic that you're playing, but that is the game that Ben Jones finds himself in here.
Yep, and well, I would have to imagine that Arnaud is just going to attack with all of his creatures. Sure, Ben Jones might even block the creature that Helm of the Host is equipping, but well, if that happens, you just re-equip it to something else. Yeah, that Helm of the Host, if you get to a long game, is one of the better cards to have access to. It's also a bit of a risky card if you play against a bit more... a deck that is a bit more aggressive. You may be spending 9 mana, and then the opponent has a removal spell to go up into a big mana advantage, but looks like Ben Jones didn't really have that here. I mean, imagine that you spend 5 mana to play it, 9 to equip, and then your opponent just plays Blink of an Eye to bounce the creature that it is currently on. You've effectively spent 9 mana, gotten nothing out of it. Your opponent spends 2. That is a tempo advantage that may be too big to come back from. But once you are into a long game, like this one, Helm of the Host can easily win by itself.
Each of these players with a similar idea in terms of how to get through their late game. It's just the details of what creature you're slapping that Helm on getting very important here, and ultimately I feel like Arnaud pretty much has these all sorted out.
Yeah, and even if Ben Jones finds some way to get back, either perhaps a disenchant effect for the Helm of the Host or some kind of removal spell, maybe a big body, bigger body to put his own Helm on, by now it may be too little too late, because he's facing a bunch of lethal attackers, doesn't have as many blockers anymore, and he's also facing down this Icy Manipulator, which long-time players will certainly realize can tap both on offense and defense.
So just so you guys know, you may have seen a handshake a little bit earlier on. I recognize that looks a little bit unusual. Basically, what was going on there was that Damien had already won. So in total, as a team, the team of Bio, Bosho and Jokum had already won their match. But you know what? They said, we're on the camera. We don't want to just stop halfway through. That's not a very fun game of Magic. So instead, Ben Jones, very nicely, I think, decided that he was going to continue to play a not very fun game of Magic against Helm of the Host. And they're actually even apparently going to show us a little bit of a Game 3.
Yeah, why not? I mean, Dominaria Limited has been super enjoyable so far. When you're here, might as well play a bit more, and I would love to see these decks in a fresh new game. But yeah, it doesn't even really matter for tiebreakers either what the outcome of this this match is. The left team has already won, but well, more Magic is always good. So some reasonable 3-drops on both sides. Skittering Surveyor, a big part of the mana bases of 3 color decks. Yavimaya Shepherd, just a perfectly solid green 3-drop. But there we have the Helm of the Host. Now making a bunch of copies of Skittering Surveyor may not be super impressive. If I were in Arnaud's seat, I would be more scared of Ben Jones playing some kind of big 5-drop and then starting to make copies of that. But it's gonna be another one of those games where we get to see Helm of the Host in action, showing that it's one of the better board stall breaking cards in the format.
It may take a little bit of time for Ben Jones to take over if all he's making is lots of Skittering Surveyors, but there's nothing to stop him in subsequent turns just playing bigger threats and getting there with something a little bit more impressive.
Ooh, wow, that's Torgar. So he played Cabal or Stronghold Confessor for just 1 mana, effectively as a ritual of some kind. So now he has a 7/6, and it also has a sweet Enters the Battlefield ability.
Yes, so Torgar Famine Incarnate. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you can sacrifice some creatures and make him a little bit cheaper. When he enters the battlefield, up to one target player's life total becomes half their starting life total, rounded down. Now, conveniently, Torgar has been iced here. However, he can still pick up a hat. And when you start making copies, I believe that they're copies of the original card.
I am not even sure. That is the type of situation where I would just call a judge to ask how this interaction works, and maybe some of the judges in the chat can tell us. Because it's also possible that if you equip Helm of the Host and make copies of it, that you actually just get another 0/4 wall copy.
An 0/4 with no abilities.
That is an attacking defender. I guess that works. Or, well, given that the creature died, maybe the players do believe that it actually makes proper 7/6s.
Yeah, I guess that given that the match is over, the pressure to call a judge not as high. And in Bolus clutches there, revealing that it doesn't just have to be stealing creatures. You can steal other types of permanents. Goes for the Helm of the Host. Technically, the Helm of the Host is still equipped to Torgar.
Okay, it looks like the majority of the people in the chat, including level 2 judges, confirm that the Helm will make original copies. So this works out favorably for Ben Jones.
Stealing that Helm, kind of interesting, because it says at the beginning of combat on your turn. So the Helm is still equipped to Torgar.
Yes.
It will be generating copies of Torgar at the start of Arnaud's
turn. Yeah,
Yes.
so he should have actually gotten a copy there on his turn. Well, unless he played it in the second main phase or forgot the trigger. But yeah, it is still currently equipped. Yeah, so this maybe if they weren't playing for fun, they might call a judge to confirm all of these interactions. But I do believe that you.
This is a weird little situation of while the control of the hat has changed, the hat is still very much being worn.
You can never target an opposing creature with an equipment, but if you take over an equipment equipped to an opposing creature, it still stays on for the time being. Well, at least we get to see all kinds of. We can learn. We can just gain lots of XP from this match in terms of weird
and
interactions.
this is full-on
in
bonus
Dominaria
XP
Limited.
because it is in a game that does not count. The team of Biobasho and Jokum have already secured their victory.
Yep. But yeah, I do believe that Arno is just missing the triggers every turn.
What a shame. He could have an army of Torgars.
He could actually use the Torgard copy to get his own life total back up to 10. Right? You don't have to target an opponent. You can actually use it as kind of a life gain card.
And it's half of the starting life total as well. So it's not as if with each subsequent Torgar it goes 10 to 5 to 2 to 1 to dead.
Yeah, now it looks like Arnaud, after missing a couple triggers, doesn't have enough blockers, and Ben Jones manages to beat, I guess, his own Helm. Yeah, this is kind of confusing.
The fun and games all completed, but the one thing that we are confident of is that Biobasho and Jokum were victorious in this Our Time Walked round. Those guys actually, both those teams were on a draw, I believe, coming into this round. One and a draw.
Oh, really?
So 2 and a draw for one of our teams. And because we finished a little bit early, we're going to get a chance to have a look at a few slides here. Earlier on, Frank, you were getting a chance to take us through a few of the key interactions that you liked, and now we're going to get a chance to see a few more kind of cool things going on. Do you want to talk us through this?
Sure, yeah, so this is just a bucket list I created earlier this week of weird things that I would love to see in action at least once throughout the lifetime of this format. My goal here would be to draft both of these cards, which is somewhat unlikely, given that it's rare and mythic. But
Though I have seen Fall of the Thran passed a reasonable amount. It's a card that on its own is a bit fiddly.
Mhm. But then if you go turn 5 Fraction Scriptures into turn 6 Fall of the Thran, then after both sagas have played out, you could have only one, basically the only creature on the entire board in play, while your opponent is left with no permanence whatsoever. Just breaking the symmetry from Fall of the Thran by exiling all their lands from the graveyard so that they cannot return them.
That sounds like a constructed level play to me.
I mean, maybe we could see a white-black deck in Standard trying to pull this off. It could be potentially somewhat powerful. Both are, expensive, but I do love the design of all of these sagas in general. They're fun to play with and against. Lead to some just interesting interactions, often interesting decisions, though not so much with these cards. But you know how you sequence the various turns. I love them in general, but this particular combo, I have not seen anyone pull it together yet. But would be sweet if the stars align this weekend.
There's something kind of flavorful as well, and this is something we see again and again in Dominaria, of the Fall of the Thran at the hands of the Phyrexians being played out between these Phyrexian scriptures and, of course, the Fall of the Thran itself. So I'm liking this one quite a bit. That one feels not so much a limited play, just one of the really cool things enabled specifically by Dominaria. Let's take a look at your next cool interaction here.
So, Garna, the Bloodflame, is the red-black signpost uncommon. And what this archetype can often do is, go for some kind of long game where ultimately you return some creatures from the graveyard, perhaps one of the 1/3s with Kicker that you can then recast for value. But here, you can actually set up a very slow but potentially powerful recursion loop when you have Garna the Bloodflame in the graveyard. Then you sacrifice Whisper, Blood, Liturgist, and something else, maybe Talat Soothsayer, to get it back. It comes back to the battlefield, so you return Whisper and Talat Soothsayer back to your hand. Then on your next turn, you replay both of the black creatures. They even have haste, thanks to Garna. You then sacrifice Garna to Talat Soothsayer, so that's back into the graveyard. And then you're back where you started, so you can again sacrifice Whisper and Talat Soothsayer to get back Garna. But you go up a card in every loop, thanks to the Soothsayer ability. So it's a very slow, extremely mana-intensive way of drawing an extra card every turn. But we might actually see this. And in fact, at the pre-release, I saw a friend of mine get pretty much this together. Even had like a Crozen Druid to recur from time to time as well. So then he, during one game, he cast the same Crozen Druid 3 times with Kicker, gaining 10 life every time. And that was pretty much the point where I was like, I love this format. I love all the weird things that can happen. And because it is a bit slower, you often actually get the time to set up all of these sweet combos.
Yeah, I'm an absolute sucker for any card that lets you sacrifice things for value. And Whisper Blood Liturgist, being able to sacrifice 2 creatures to return any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, I think that has implications in some constructed formats. I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be winning any GPs in Standard, in Modern, in Legacy, and so on, but Whisper Blood Liturgist feels like the sort of card that I'm certainly considering for the likes of Commander. Being able to get back key creatures, and anytime that you're being able to get back creatures with any kind of a coming into play ability, be it Garner the Bloodflame or otherwise, just seems like the sort of thing that is worth keeping on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, it is a legendary creature itself, Whisper, so who knows, maybe a Commander deck, maybe a Brawl deck, you might be able to build it around. Could be pretty sweet.
Lovely stuff. So, are there any more cool things that we have in Dominaria to look for? Of course there are.
Oh yeah, we still have a bunch. Well, we actually already saw Torgar Feminine Incarnate doing some work in the previous game. What I want to highlight, I think I also mentioned it in that game, is that Torgar just targets a player and resets it to half their starting life total. So while you will usually try to play this maybe as early as in the turn 4, maybe with a Sapperling migration or something, and put your opponent down to 10. If need be, when you're already down to, for example, 1 life, you can target yourself and go all the way up to 10 life, which is just a sweet possibility to keep in mind.
See, I'm already thinking. Also, Torgal lets you sacrifice creatures in order to reduce their cost, which makes life potentially a little bit easier in terms of if you've got cool sacrifice abilities, you can get something going. Obviously, if you can get in a spot where you're casting Torgal for 2 mana, which actually seems quite achievable, then you also have just a gigantic monster for what you're paying. And then also, I mean, if you've got something like Lich's Mastery in play, then he can sometimes represent a life gain card.
Right. And then you actually draw the cards. Well, I haven't seen Lich's Mastery in play at all so far, but yeah, that does sound pretty sweet. Just,
there's a whole host of just really cool, really interesting, really deep cards in this format, some of which we're going to see in Limited, some of which we're going to see in Standard, but I know a lot of players that are excited about the Brawl format, excited about the Commander format, excited about some of the more casual constructed formats where there are just really unusual, interesting, and potentially very powerful abilities on some of these cards.
Absolutely. Dominaria is filled with build-arounds, and I love to have those cards also as a brewer and standard. You can make so many cool decks now, ranging from just monocolor decks to weird decks with funky infinite combos that are made possible by Dominaria. I've been greatly enjoying the set so far.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain key cards, certain key words that I'm always looking for if I'm looking to build a weird, interesting combo deck. If you go on Gatherer and you look in the text search for things like whenever, for any kind of triggered ability, or sacrifice, if you already know that you've got some things that do cool things when they go to the graveyard, then you can create some really powerful decks. Obviously, within this limited format, people kind of have to work with what they've got, but I think that one of the cool things about some of these interactions we've been going through is that some of them really are achievable in Limited if you just know to look out for them. And now we've got a few things to look out for in the future rounds here at Grand Prix Bologna, and of course in the future constructed rounds with Dominaria in future tournaments. For now though, I'll look to the future in the immediate term, sees a few ad breaks. After them though, we'll have a little bit more magic for you here at Grand Prix Bologna. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Frank Carston, and these are the messages.